I'm just going to ask a couple of quick questions and then we'll open it out because I'm sure the audience will want to talk to you more. So really we've got two sort of threads of activity here. We've got the process where the community decides that they're not going to let the developers take over their beloved pub and do everything they can to successfully achieve saving it. And then we've got the process of your making the film and the points of intersection between the two of those processes. Could you just sort of like draw out how it all kind of happened and came together?
It's a tricky question. The history of the Ivy House team saving the pub has been quite well documented. I think you understand the history from the film of the events of April 2012 and the reopening in September the 13th, and it's 2013. It's probably clear to the audience that I live, let's say, very locally to the pub. So I filmed in 2012 during the closing down party, and I had a very, very strong sense of the anger and the mourning, and also that there was an awful lot of creative energy in this community, and that it was both a symptom and a metaphor, if you like. And so when, I was involved in the campaign to save the pub, as everyone here was as well, everyone from the pub team, that is. And when the pub takeover happened, Tessa and Howard gave me the keys in, and I begun to understand that it was a metaphor for an experience that many people are having in London of, as I said at the beginning, a kind of privatisation or ascetisation of communities, and that felt like a very important thing to start meditating on. And the meditation in the film is obviously completely extends that metaphor into, if you like, the creativity and imagination, or if you like, imaginative potential of communities to think and be different.
And when you decided to make the film, did you have already very well worked out how you wanted to approach it, how you wanted to involve the community, how you wanted to draw out stories, put the sound and the image together, mix the kind of performance and imaginative and kind of performative and realist bits all together? You knew that, you planned it?
Yeah, well, I'd done a lot of the research for the film was continuing to photograph. And alongside that, I was thinking a lot about participatory art processes. I was thinking about acoustic ecologies. And what I mean by that is acoustic ecologies is something that is experienced in sound art, actually. And what it means is it's just a deep listening into the environment that you are embedded in. So I started to think of, if you like, what happened to the Ivy House was this kind of social ecology. So how could I keep extending the metaphor? So the idea of using the polyphonic voice of like multiple voices speaking in a room, that's pretty much what we hear in pubs, and how we single in and we tune in to different aspects of conversation. But it's also the polyphonic voice and the use of no talking heads and stuff like that was very much to do with the idea that it's a community of individuals, but ultimately it's a community. It's not an individual voice, it's a communal voice. And that then I wanted to, thinking about other things in participatory art, I took, I wanted to work with participatory processes and pub cultural forms, but they were pub cultural forms that were already pre-existing in the Ivy House. So Wendy's dance class had been running for some time, and I photographed that, and then I started to think and mull on that and how I could extend the metaphor. The same with all of the folk music now. The Ivy House was a kind of form, big 70s, punk rock venue, but now it's kind of very much a folk. Well, there's many things, and the pub team will say different things, but it's got a very strong presence as a kind of centre of folk music. Sue and Nigel sitting here in the front row from The Goose Is Out, you know, the Nunhead Folk Circle, etc., etc., etc. So then there was things in that I wanted to start taking and again developing and extend the metaphor, and with the performance poetry. So that is something which I think is really exciting. That poetry is performed in pubs, and you know, people doing open mic stuff up and down the country, and there's a real movement in it. And so I wanted storytelling. So if there were going to be any talking heads, I wanted it in a creative form, a pub cultural form. So Laurie, I don't know if she's still here because it's quite late and people have had to. Well done, Laurie, you're up there. Good stuff. You know, Laurie is very, very skilled at leading workshops, and Laurie came and worked with the team, and we recruited people from the pub community, some of whom had written before, many of whom hadn't written anything and certainly not performed anything, and we ran workshops in the pub, so that, again, the individual stories were expressed through a cultural form, if you like. So all of these layers of thinking came alongside the actual research of the film, which the actual research of the film was the, if you like, the intellectual research, but also just continuing to shoot and mostly to record sound. Okay, I'm going to free associate in response to that question. I think we're at a moment politically where the kind of, you know, the triumph of the individual and everything that was kind of promised of late capitalism that is, you know, absolutely deserted us as a cultural possibility, really. You know, rampant individualism is certain, you know, well, we all know what rampant individualism means and the kind of harm that it has caused, you know, communities, societies, entire cultures, war, genocide, etc., etc., etc. But mostly in the UK, just a kind of, you know, appalling social inequity and economic deprivation. And I think that there's also a kind of fatigue that people feel with, like, constantly representing themselves as individuals, you know, and certainly that's also very much part of media culture. And the film refuses that. This is also the mirrors, that it's pushing the gaze back on the audience. That you know, the idea of the individual is, I feel, is dispersing in this political moment, and it's happening everywhere. You know, I think so. I'm not aware of the novel that you're talking about, but I'd be very excited to read it. I haven't heard the news today, there is, yeah, I mean, these were my kind of gut feelings about the polyphonic voice, that it's about communities, and it's about the dispersal, if you like, of individuals, that individuals exist as one of the many. Yeah, I mean, that's precisely the questions that we're all left pondering, and you know, the image that I consciously, you know, staged that the debate there, if you like, over another image of the furniture choreography, this time of the poets setting their stage. So, if you like, this was the question the poets are left pondering on behalf of us. And a question that we're all still pondering. I mean, certainly the film is exploring the nature of insider, outsider, all of these things. And I'd say I'm posing questions, and you know, I am not answering those questions. I'm leaving the questions hanging. But it's a very poignant question for London, isn't it? I mean, certainly I'd say one thing, that the movement onto Peckham Rye at the end is, obviously, it's kind of carnivalesque celebration, but it is also a kind of a funeral procession, if you like, for you know, a moment in the social, you know, in time. which has also passed. And certainly, yes, the area has changed. There's an awful lot of money has come into the area, and it's changed the nature of the community, and that's the reality of London because of housing and planning policy. And I'm very clear about that. This is around planning policy. This could be changed very, very, very fast. We all know it. But it's in a lot of people's interests for property in London to become so expensive, right? So it is a form of social cleansing, and the film asks that question. So the movement at the end is also a form of mourning, which acknowledges that, but without basically banging it on the head,
Okay, I'll ask a very practical one, which is really, there's a lot of people in this film.
Yeah.
And you've talked about the wonderful result of bringing everyone together with the polyphonic voice and the collective activity. Mm-hmm. But on a practical level, how did you actually manage to kind of make that happen as a film director?
That's a credit to the team that I work with, and also the community that I live in, and that's one of the things, to be clear. I live in that community, so I wasn't an artist kind of parachuted in doing a participatory art project. I'm working with people who are my friends and neighbours, and saying, well, what if we did this? So we opened an invitation, and it was really pretty much to use the Ivy House's mailing lists, mostly. The Ivy House, the general Ivy House mailing list and the Ivy House shareholder mailing list, and we invited people to participate. And then Harriet Fleurio, who production managed the film and did a lot of work around the events, and Susie Milburn, and just good communication and word of mouth and an open invitation to participate. That was it. We shot it on multiple formats. So I'm looking at Jack, who's the Ivy House manager, who actually he quite a lot of his GoPro footage is in it at the end. So yeah, Ivy House staff are also camera operating in this film. We shot it on a C300 and an A7S, which is the slow motion camera that we used. And again, that was approaches to thinking around time, this idea that past, present and future is, exists. So this idea of space being all of the stories that exist in it. And that's also why I used camera formats in the way that I did, and approached time in the way that I did, but also this idea of the spiralling structure. Is that a helpful answer? Yeah.
And unless we've got anyone with a burning question, I'll just finish with one. I mean, this is a film that shows a victory. You're right, in a sense, we're still living in a kind of dangerous world where these things, where there are not that many victories. But do you see the film at all as a kind of call to arms, that we should all be vigilant and persistent in our refusal to accept this corporate takeover of?
Yeah, I mean, who in this audience couldn't possibly, agree with that as a statement? I think, I hope the film is a discussion point, and it's at once a celebration of the community, but it is also asking those big questions. And I did approach it in that way. I didn't just want to make a triumph over adversity narrative, like woohoo. The Ivy House is a brilliant and fantastic and inspirational story, but the wider social issues also kind of exist, and I wanted to have an interdependence and awareness of these two things, that whilst there's hope and joy, there is also a sense of mourning, and that the utopia, as I was talking about this at symposium at the ICA the other day, is an interdependence both of these effectual resonances, if you like. But what I do think it's a powerful kind of call to arms about is the idea of creatively imagining differently. How can we imagine differently? And I think that's what I was trying to do with the form of the work, is to suggest. Sorry, I'm talking to the floor. I realise that I'm thinking, God, I need another drink. It's an idea of the possibilities of creatively imagining living differently.
Well, what better way to finish on? So let's all kind of do that and start, I guess, by having a drink.
Yes.
Sarah Turner, thank you so much indeed for this
Thank
film,
you for
and for
having us.
everybody else who's here who participated in it. Yeah.